Mostly what we do is hands-on, and it requires critical thinking. Most people may not be aware that being an artisan requires a lot of thinking, because it's almost as if you're a doctor of pets, because equipment does not talk back. So you really need to know what you're doing. So that's the most passionate part about it. My name is Myeza. I run a company called Air Conditioning and Refrigeration that specializes specifically on maintenance, installation and repairs of all types of air conditioning and refrigeration systems. So I'm originally from KZN. I'm a township boy. I grew up in a township, but I did stay in a farm a little bit, so I enjoyed some of that life. Finished my high school life in the township. Then from there, I went to study electrical engineering for a few years. And during my studies, I did take part-time jobs. My first job was at Ackermans because I couldn't get a job. I worked there for a few months, about 4 to 6 months. Then I stumbled into air conditioning refrigeration, where I worked for a big company called Thamsanqa. They actually specialize in transport refrigeration. I actually bounced into air conditioning and refrigeration by chance. I couldn't get a job because I was either overqualified and underexperienced at the time of my qualification, which was electrical engineering. So I got an apprenticeship as a refrigeration mechanic. Worked there for a couple of years and then got qualified, and then left that company to join another company. But on my third company, I then realized that there's actually no problem with the previous companies I've worked for. It was actually me. So then I started to look within myself, and I discovered, no, listen, I've actually got a passion to run my own business. Hence, that's why I'm actually living from company to company, because I want to be responsible, I want to be in charge. But what really triggered it all initially was that there was nobody in the black community that really knew about what I was doing at all, literally at all, in such a manner that they actually didn't know where I studied and where to study such a trade. So that's when I first found the first gap. I said, let me introduce the profession to the community I come from. And the second one, let me afford them the opportunity to learn and get into the space or the trade. And that's when I actually opted to open my own business, which will then give me leverage and power to actually introduce the trade to people, and also afford to be able to employ people and train them as well within the specific trade. Normally, when new people start in the industry or the company, we try to ensure that they understand what are most commonly used parts and instruments. Originally, when I started, we were just doing maintenance, repairs, and installation. And then as the business grew, we started now absorbing apprentices within the business. And then as the business grew further, we couldn't absorb more apprentices than I needed. Then what we do, we created a subsidiary company called Mzansi Institute of Learning. So that in that way, we can be able to absorb a little bit more apprentices than the company can be able to absorb on its own. I was literally one of the first people to actually get a NQF level 3 qualification at the time on air conditioning refrigeration. Literally the first. Probably I've been first in a lot of things. I've been first in a lot of things. I was the first person to get that qualification. I was also the youngest qualified at the time. I was probably 20, if not 19, when I got my trade test. That's unheard of. I was the first person to acquire 2 degrees in one institution, graduate in one institution in one day. I'm the first refrigeration air conditioning expert for WellSkills South Africa, so I represent WellSkills South Africa in the global community. I've held that position from 2019 till to date. So I've been quite first in quite a number of things. I've got 4 degrees. I've got one in engineering, I've got one in HR, I've got an honors degree in HR, human resource management, I've got one in project management, and then I've got a administration qualification, which is my doctorate. So I studied a little bit of HR and then ran that business. Unfortunately, the partnership failed. That was the first hint of failure that I've had in my life. Total disaster, downfall, you name it. Debts, everything, you name it, I had it. I didn't know how to get out of that. And then I had to do something about it. To tell you the truth, I was very embarrassed to go out in the industry and look for a job. When I say industry, to go in a specific company that specializes in air conditioning refrigeration, because everybody knew me. Getting a job was not an issue. Getting a good salary was not an issue. But the embarrassment that I had was an issue. So it was a personal thing. So I actually stayed at home. And I recall at the time I was actually studying. I was studying that time at DUT. And I didn't have money to actually go to school. So I would borrow 100 rand from a friend. And all I needed was 50 rand petrol to go and come back, because I was doing Saturday classes only. 50 rand petrol. The other 100 rand was to buy lunch and cold drink so I can look normal with other kids. True story. I literally did that because when the business collapsed, I was almost it was a 1-year program because it was a postgraduate. So I was almost 9 months to the program. So I did that for the rest of the months. We're talking about at least a good 5 months before the actual exams. And I did that through the exams. So I graduated, I passed. I didn't graduate because I didn't have money to pay the school fees. So that's when the reality hits me now. I can't get this qualification, I can't move in my life, I need to do something. So then I went and looked for a job. Now mind you, my searching for the job is stay away from the actual industry, you know, where I got core experience. Fortunately, I worked for a big corporate where I was the maintenance manager regionally, which was a good position. So I went in there, all gun blazing, got in there, ready to make decisions. Corporate life and business, two different things. And a small business, two different things. To make a decision in the corporate life, there's a hierarchy, there's procedures and all sorts of things. That's when I found it difficult to navigate. That is when I registered for my MBA to say, I need to know what everybody does in this business. So the whole entire value chain, I need to understand it. So that's when I did my MBA. So during my time of my MBA, I was slowly getting promotions because I was learning and practicing. Before I even graduated, I was then appointed as the project executive. That was my last position I held in a corporate. I was there for about a year or two, if I'm not mistaken. Then I realized, listen, this is truly not for you. You've climbed the highest rank in the business. You're still not fulfilled. You're still not happy. Quit while you're still ahead. Packed up my things. People are shocked. Packed up my things, resigned, went and started business. Mind you, I already had experience of starting a business from scratch. I know where to go, who to touch. I had old clients that I could reconnect with. So starting a business from a second time was not a difficult journey for me. That's when I started Myeza Air Conditioning, and I've been running it ever since. My selection of being an entrepreneur, specifically in trade, was it's not rocket science. I was an artisan by profession. I studied electrical engineering from high school. So I've been an artisan almost all my life in terms of my work experience and exposure. So it became a very logical decision to say, do what you're good at, do what you're passionate at, do what you experience at, do what you love. So it was a very logical decision for me, and there was no other business that one could choose. I am venturing into other business in terms of training, but as you can see, the training will be including or in line with being a tradesman, which still speaks to my experience, my passion, and my knowledge. So my mother worked for a hospital, So to her, the most respected people were doctors. So I knew from early on that she wanted me to be a doctor. That's a medical doctor, to be specific. So the perception of a person wearing an overall, for me personally, has been fulfilling, because I wore it whilst I was in high school. So I was never embarrassed about it at all, you know. And then in terms of community, there's always been a stigma that people in overalls are slightly lower class than people in suits. And that's the perception and view that I had when I was growing up. But when I was employed and I was qualified, it was a very, very difficult realization for some people, specifically me, to say, per se, when I realized that I earned 4 times as a store manager and probably 6 times as one of the managers that works in a big corporate. So I earned a relatively good salary. When I say good, I mean really good. I don't even pay myself that salary. So that's how good my salary was as an artisan. As an entrepreneur, being an artisan, one of the biggest challenges is balancing the administrative operation of the business and articulating the difference between being an artisan and being an entrepreneur. It's a very fine line, and you can get lost between the two, and sometimes it can be very costly, because if you can't make a segregation very quickly, you won't know what to prioritize. For example, when you talk about administration, I'm being broad in that sense, finance and accounting, HR, the administrative side of the paperwork, you know, that documenting and recording things. So artisans find it very difficult to shift from working with the screwdrivers, the spanners, the testers, the multimeters, and all these instruments that they need to connect to an equipment and do their thing, when it's time for them to work with their laptops and emails and actually run the business and make technical decisions on the business, for the business, not technical decisions for the client and the equipment. So that transaction was quite a difficult shift for me as an entrepreneur. You know, it took quite a while to really separate myself from work physically or practically, to work in terms of administration and being able to actually juggle the two. So that was the biggest challenge for me. Being an artisan itself, when I first started out, it was very challenging, because there was nobody I knew that had a technical background of what I did. So whatever challenge I had technically, my source of knowledge was only one: go back to work, ask somebody at work. So if the relationship is not good with someone at work, I would really battle. Hence, I resorted to reading books. The reason I ended up being an academic in the first place was not purely because I wanted to be an academic. It's because I realized that if you can't ask people, just research it and read it out yourself. So that's when it all started. You know, it started with the challenge that I don't have reference points, because there were so many few people that I knew that actually did the trade, you know, and the trade was not, you know, freely open in terms of the market. It was even the training at the time where they were like, literally in Durban, there was only one training institution. One. Here, there was one trade test center in the country. It was Artisans in the whole country. You know, that's, you know, how difficult it was in terms of being a practical artisan. But the way I overcame it was that I just read more, asked more, researched more. And then the more I read and I practiced and I tested, then I realized, you know what, there's very little advice I would need from an experienced person. So let me first research myself, answer myself. If that fails, then I can seek help. When I started out, no one believed in me or what I was doing. In fact, it was very, abnormal for one to start a business at such a young age. People expect you to be a little bit more seasoned to actually go and start a business. which I believe might be a little bit incorrect. But I've had people not believing in me. I've had mentors advising me to shut it down, close it, because, well, it's not making profit, you know. And unfortunately, or fortunately in my case, I did not listen to their advice, you know. I soldiered on, I make means to survive, and the business overcame the challenges of being bankrupt, and it grew and it made profit. And then here we are today, we're still in the same business operating. But what was my lesson about people judging what you do is purely because they don't know what you do. And the second is that they never thought of it, so they can't have ideas how best you can achieve it. And lastly, they are scared, not for just you, for themselves. So it's often when you get very high criticism without any advice, it's often fear that if you fail, you're going to have to do this. If you fail, I get affected and so forth. And if you're an entrepreneur, you must just embrace failure and just soldier on. You will fail. You must fail. If you don't fail, you can't learn anything. I'm Truman. I'm a proud artisan. My skill, my business.